Welcome back. We are Comp229 Web Application Development, and it's week 4, part 1 of our video series. And today we're talking about Intro to MongoDB. Let's talk about technical requirements and knowledge requirements again. I've cut these down this time around compared to last week. Today what we were looking for is that MongoDB has been installed. So that is the assumption that you've installed MongoDB before you do this video. And you should also have some basic knowledge of Mongo commands. At the end of today, what we're looking for is that you're going to be able to create some basic Mongo database. I'm going to go over some commands to find, insert, update, and delete documents in a collection. And you should have a better understanding of MongoDB and how to access it on the command line. So again, nothing in Express right now. The next video will handle how to restructure Express and how to connect to MongoDB with a package called Mongoose. But for now, let's get back to MongoDB. So to get to MongoDB, you have to go to mongodb.com. This is where you would go here to download and install MongoDB. It's a popular NoSQL database that many of us use, especially for the mean stack, Mongo, Express, Angular, and Node, or the MERN stack, Mongo, Express, React, and Node. We're going to be talking about Angular later on in this semester, but for now we're talking about Mongo, which is the database. Great thing about the mean stack is it's JavaScript everywhere, and MongoDB is no exception. We're going to use a JSON-like object to create our database with MongoDB. Great place to go here is you can go to Docs. It talks about everything for how-to guides to, for example, if you want to learn how to install Mongo or how to secure your Mongo deployment or a bunch of different things, it's all here for you to get going with. And I'll leave you to do that exploring on your own. For now, what we want to do is I want to kick up a command line. And if you've installed Mongo properly, as per the documentation, you should be able to do something that looks like this, mongod. Now, if you're running a Mac environment or a Linux environment, then instead of doing this, you might have to use the sudo command. But otherwise, if you press enter, what this does is it initializes the MongoDB server locally on your machine. Notice that it's listening on port 27017 on the IP address is 127.0.0.1. That's localhost. Okay, so that's where it's listening. And you need to have this little window up when you're using MongoDB all the time. Okay, you can't close it. Otherwise, the server won't be running. I elected not to have the server run as a service for this semester, but you can certainly add it as a service in the background. Okay, so that's how you kick off the Mongo server. But now we need another window. Just going to kick up another window here, command. And you can see here, I'm going to access the Mongo server through the command mongo, like so. Notice that it reacted. As soon as I connected to it, it says we have one connection, right? So here's the connection right here. One connection now open. And you can see that our connection is connected through this other command prompt window. All right, so let's clear the screen. So CLS clears the screen. And we can do a show DBS. Now I have several different databases. One of them is something called the Sports Store, which we're going to recreate over the course of this semester. What I want to do right now is create almost like a different kind of store. We're going to make a bookstore this time around. So let's do that. So we'll say, in order for us to activate a database, we're going to say use, and then we're going to say bookstore, bookstore. Okay. And now it says immediately that we switch to DB bookstore. Okay, that's how simple it is. Bookstore. So in our bookstore example, we're going to activate a collection. If I want to see how many collections there are, I can say show collections. You can see now that there's no collections. Think about collections as tables from a relational database perspective. If you were going to compare a relational database to this. Tables are collections, and documents are records. So I want to insert a document. One thing with NoSQL databases is there's no required schema. So when I want to insert a document, I can say something like db db.insert, and then in brackets, I can put in a data object. So what I want to do is specify certain things. For example, in a bookstore, I got to insert where, first of all, and you got to think about the bookstore has books. Maybe it has other items as well. So here's our books. Insert inside the books collection. That's what we're saying here. A book with a name that is our property, or our field, if you will. Our name of the book. For example, let's say one of my favorite books is Dune, right? It's an old book. And we also want to put in the author, right? So that's the author. We can put in Frank Herbert, okay? And I can't recall the year, but let's bring it up in another window. So Dune book, year of publication. Wow, August 1st, 1965. So we're going to go back here, and that's an old book. I'm not that old. So we're going to say published, right? And we're going to say, now I'm going to put a value here as a string, but you can also use this as a date. I'm just going to put 1965. Okay, so published 1965. We could also put in a description. So let's say, here's a description of the book. And I can get this description from somewhere online for the Dune book. I'm going to put in a few of them like this. You can look it up on your favorite Wikipedia as well. But it's a science fiction novel, is what it is, and it's set in the future, right? Dune tells a story of Paul Atreides, whose family accepts the stewardship of a planet Arrakis. There we go. That's good enough. So I copy that one, and I go here and paste. Okay, so that's the description. So it's a long description, right, as an example. And that's pretty good. So I've got a couple fields, a name, an author, when it was published, and a description. Maybe the cost would be good. So let's add a cost. So again, we'll say price. And we'll say that the price right now is $9.95. Again, you could use this as a number as opposed to, right now it is just a string. If I wanted to make it a number, I would just put a value in here, $9.95, right? So and instead of it being a string, if I wanted to calculate the total in my cart, let's say, or something like that. End this off with a curly brace and a parentheses, and then press enter. And if everything is done well, we have our first record inside of our books collection. Okay, so that's the first thing. If I want to see this, right, so let's just space down a little bit, db.books.find, if I just put that in, you're going to see it the same way that I put it in is the same way it's going to come out, right? However, I can also put db.books.find and then .pretty to make it look nicer. And so now you'll have something that looks like this, right? So where things are kind of in a line. One thing to note is this, that the ID is auto-generated. I didn't generate that object ID. It's something that's been created for me, right? I could add an additional ID if I want to, if I wanted to have a key, as an example, a key value that I wanted to iterate through. But the ID is generally something that's auto-generated, and it's created with the hash code, the time, the machine, and so on. A bunch of unique characters, similar to what we do when we generate a commit on GitHub. Okay, so that's what this does. Let's add a couple of more, right, and then we'll stop. So notice that I don't really need a schema, some kind of structure, but I'm creating a structure for myself anyway because I want to be organized. So let's make a new one. So db.books.insert as an example. And again, I'm going to start it off the same way. So we'll say the first thing is the name. You don't have to do this, by the way. You can have different fields in MongoDB because it's unstructured. However, it's not recommended. And so let's say the next book that I like is Blood Music. Old book again. The author is Greg Bear. And it was published. When was it published? We can also say date or year instead of published, and we can talk about that later. as an option instead of published, right? So if I wanted to look up blood music for Greg Bear, it was published in 1985. Okay, a little bit better. So yeah, 20 years later. So 1985, still quite a long time ago. And then I want a description. Again, you can look up your favorite book when you do this, when you're doing this. And then just grab some description stuff. So I'm just going to grab, if I can grab one line of the first line of the Wikipedia description and put that in there. There we go. That's the first line actually. And then followed by the price, which let's make this a more expensive book, $19.95. All right, maybe just more popular or whatever. Okay, now if you make a mistake like this, it says sometimes if you have a problem and you do this, right, you can see that maybe I missed something. There's nothing for you to worry about because again, if I was to look at, I can always space up and try and put it in again if I need to, right? If I can also go up to all the commands I had. So there's the first one, there's Dune. Right, so let's take a look and see if I can parse to see what the problem is. So db.books.find, db.books.insert, db.books.insert. So that's not the problem. So let's take a look and see where the problem might lie, right? And then this is kind of an important part. So again, we see name, author, right? Colon is separating everything else. Comma is separating the different fields. Published, right? You can see that 1985 is here, comma, our description, colon, and then this long piece here. I think probably what happened is this new sites thing is what messed it up, and you can fix this by backspacing and changing new sites to single quotes instead of double quotes. That you can do. So you can say single quotes here. That's probably what happened because it was missing some data because you have quotes inside quotes. And that's what probably did it. If you press enter now, we should get a right result of inserted as 1. And if I do a find pretty, now I have 2 results. Okay, one more, and then we'll stop this stuff, and we'll talk about how to delete one of the entries or update them, and then we'll have done full CRUD. Okay, so let's add another one. So one of the popular books that are going to be made into a series is the Foundation series by Isaac Asimov, right? So Foundation is a series in the far future, and it starts off, let's see where it was published. So published between 1942 and 1993, so kind of an older series of books, right? So let's take a look at some of these books. So the first one that was part of the Foundation series was I, Robot. I, Robot was one of the first books, and you guys may have heard of that. It's part of the Foundation universe. So let's look at that. So db.books.insert. Okay, and again, we can go with a name, I, Robot. That's the name of the book. The author. Make sure that you put everything as closely as possible to the same if you care. If you don't care, and if you make a mistake, then updating it might be challenging. This will be Isaac Asimov, famous science fiction writer. I'm not sure why I'm choosing science fiction today, just am. And published, and the year was 1950. Okay, 1950. And then we're going to say description, just like we've done before. So you can see longhand, what we're doing is we're creating these little JSON documents. So a fix-up novel between 1940 and 1950 and no press. Okay, so that's like way up here. Short stories and essays. Excellent. Okay, so it's not that long. There we go. I, Robot. Okay, and then followed up by price. And we're going to make this price something like $24.95. The most expensive book yet. Okay, there we go. And we have 3 items now in our list. You can see that these are the 3 items, and they all have a very similar schema, which is what I want you to take away from this. All right, so how do I drop an item? We've talked about how to how to add an item, and we also talked about how to explore an item. But how do we drop an item? How do we do these kind of things? Well, I can drop the whole database or the whole collection by doing, I'm not going to do this here, but it's db.books.drop. If you did that, the entire books collection is gone. We don't want to do that. I think that would be a waste for all the work we just done. So what else can we do? We can also do, if I want to delete an item, let's say I want to delete iRobot, right? So how would I do that? Well, the first part, when it comes to updating or deleting, the first part to think about is I want to search for something. There's 2 parts to the thing I'm going to put in. The first part is the thing I'm searching for, okay? So I want to search for something that matches my item. For example, the name of the book, okay? So let's say, for example, I want to delete iRobot. So the first part of the deletion goes like this, db.books.delete. Okay, and then the first part is, what am I looking for? The search field. The search field is name, here's my match, and then followed by what the name is, iRobot. So this is what I'm looking to delete. And if I press enter, and if it matches anything, then it'll say it deleted. Or it might say delete is not a function, right? So what else? What other things can we do? Is it remove that will do it for us? By the way, if we look at other functions, we might think delete is the way to go. But let's try remove. Again, we're just trying to be intuitive here. So remove, and we look like that. Solved it. And if I did a find pretty now, we can see that there's only 2. I can always add it back in, by the way. This is the beautiful thing about this client, this CLI. I can go back in here and say, okay, I want to add it in. So now we're back in again, and we can find that there's 3 items again. Notice, though, that the ID, which was in order, is no longer in order, right? Because we've gone to the next item. We've removed E. E is gone. So there's C, there's D, there's F, but there's no E because we removed it. And we can never get that back. So that's that. Well, we can if we use this exact ID and so on, and then add in. We can actually specify an ID if we really want to, although it's not recommended. All right, so that's how you delete an object. You can also use delete one. That's also something you can use. If I want to update a record, right? I want to update a record. Again, the first part is the thing that I'm looking for. So the first part is the search field. So again, if I was going to look, I want to update iRobot, and I want to change the price to $24.95 as an example. Instead of $24.95, I made a mistake. It's $14.95. How do I do that? So again, I want to say db.books, and I want to update, and I want to update 1, right? And this is my search part. The first part is the search field, which is the thing that I'm searching for, name to match, right? I want to find a book that has iRobot as a name field, okay? This is the one I want. The next part is the thing that I'm doing. So I want to set, as an example, a certain object. So I want to set a certain object. So maybe I want to set the object which is price, and I want to set it to, instead of $24.95, $14.95. So that is the thing I'm setting. Okay. And then, so that takes care of the set. Then I've got to close off the brackets for this. And if I did it right, I press enter, then it's going to say, okay, acknowledge true, match count 1, I match 1, modified count 1. Okay, now let's see if I can, what that looks like when I do a db.find.pretty. Notice that everything stayed the same, but $14.95 went from $24.95. So that's pretty good. So now we've done full CRUD. I've shown you examples of how to do reading with find. You can also find 1, there's different kinds of commands you can look up. You can update many if you want to update more than one, and so on. We can also include subdocuments, and subdocuments would be in a series of an array. We can make an array of objects as opposed to just these simple properties, and we'll do that when we create our bookstore later on. Okay, so this is kind of the way the books are right now. Maybe later what we're going to do is, instead of doing it this way, what we're going to do instead is we're going to create a way of using full CRUD, so create, read, update, delete, so we can add in new books with a specific schema, and we can have subdocuments, for example, things like ratings, right? So the rating will be a subdocument that we can rate the book, right, later on. That's it for MongoDB. We've covered a couple things. Like we said, we covered basic Mongo commands, and I've showed you how to use the Mongo CLI at a very basic level. And the same kind of commands we saw in the Mongo CLI are the ones that we're going to use with a package called Mongoose that we're going to connect to now in the next video with Express and the Express generated site that we made. So that's it for me right now. I'll see you back in the next video